a lot of the customers have been so motivated to see us succeed and to see a lot of small businesses around our town succeed. I think that we're seeing somewhat of a resurgence of that throughout the United States. And I hope that the same level of grace that we got as a little fledgling business in Sioux Falls in 2012, I hope that customers can kind of take that and expand on that throughout the United States with what a lot of businesses are going through right now, because a lot of businesses need grace.
I'm Carolyn Hadlock, Executive Creative Director at Young & Larimore, and this is the Beautiful Thinkers Project, a podcast where I ask founders, creators, leaders, and visionaries how they bring their ideas to life. As we enter these conversations with thinkers across disciplines like art, science, and business, we'll learn a little bit more about the practices and identifiers that create beautiful thinking, something defined so individually, but so universally recognizable. Welcome to the Beautiful Thinkers Project. This morning, I'm talking with David Napolitano. He is the founder of Breadico, which is a sourdough artisan bread company that is based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I'm so excited to chat with you today about bread and how your brand came to be.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Maybe the place to start, David, is to talk about Sioux Falls. I know you moved there when you were young, but maybe just talk about your origin story and then how you came about starting Breadico.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I went to college out here in Sioux Falls, and it was just kind of a nice sized city. It was quiet. I really enjoyed going around and getting to know just kind of some of the little businesses at that point in time when I was in college in 2004. After graduation, I basically moved out east to Boston, actually, and was very acquainted with some new types of food that I hadn't had out here in the Midwest. Part of that was bread, some Armenian bakeries and some Italian bakeries. And I really started to enjoy having the fresh bread every single day in a very European style way. Years later, when I had moved back to Sioux Falls, I had kind of realized that, I like to work with my hands, and I think I want to try making bread. And so I just kind of got started.
And did you start selling in a farmer's market there? Is that your origin?
My parents and I had converted a little stall in their garage into a commercial bakery. It was a certified commercial bakery, and I bought this little hearth-baked oven and started baking out of there. We went to farmers markets, just one little farmers market downtown, and every Saturday we'd go there, and people really responded very well to what we were making. And we were only making, 4 varieties of bread at the time, because there was no temperature control in a garage stall. And a big part of making bread, especially sourdough bread, is controlling your temperature. So the product that I was putting out was a very good product, but it was not the best product that it could be, because my facility wasn't, it was a garage. And now that about 8 years have passed, we've been able to build this new facility here on the south side of town that has a temperature controlled mixing room. We have a nice large walk-in refrigerator. We have our proof boxes and a nice large commercial oven. So we're actually able to we're going to do about 25 different breads this weekend for the farmers market, and kind of keep that number going up as we continue through the season.
But you guys have a storefront, right? People can come.
Correct.
And do you have one location or 2 locations?
Well, we just have one location in Sioux Falls. It's only a storefront, so you can walk in and you can buy breads, and we're also moving into pastries now. We had previously had a restaurant and a cafe, in the interim between the farmers market at the very beginning and what we're doing now. We had developed a bakery that had turned itself into a restaurant just by the demands of customers. And that was a lot of fun. But we went ahead and closed that down, and we're focusing again just solely on making bread.
I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I loved the story. But tell a story about the Pizza de Paolo and how that came to be.
Sure, Pizza de Paolo. Well, after we had opened our little bakery downtown, which was about 1.5 years after I had started, we had a lot of demand and people asking us, "Hey, do you guys make pizza?" And I think that's a really great question for every bakery out there. A lot of bakeries you see these days are making pizzas on the weekends. So we had ventured into that with our little bakery, and the response was very good. Making pizza is quite demanding, And it's not something that I necessarily wanted to pour myself into because I knew that I wanted to be making bread. So my father said, well, I'll run your pizza shop. Let me do it. I said, okay, sure. So we went ahead and rented at a very good location on one of the main streets in Sioux Falls. And we went in there and built a pizza shop, cannolis and soda pops and salads and Italian pizzas. And my dad's running it with my mother. And I think they're having a good time.
Yeah, I loved how you said it gives them something to do in retirement. I thought that was
Uh-huh.
really, really cool. And normally you hear family business starting from the dad.
Uh-huh.
So to have a family business kind of start from the son and then migrate out to the dad, I think is kind of a cool story. Not one that I hear that often.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, talk to me about the origin of the name Breadico.
Well, I had wanted something that was very recognizable in terms of what we do. And so I had started with the word bread. And I had also wanted something that was Italian. But what kind of I get tired of sometimes and kind of pigeonholes you is when walk into a place and it's overtly Italian. It's like this is all Italian, and it's people walk in, customers, and talk to you with their accent that they throw at you, and it's not exactly what I wanted. I very much also wanted a very American place, just like Italian American, but artisan. So I was looking at all these different suffixes from the Latin language and the Italian language, and eco is, well, it generally means small and little. And I had actually kind of was playing off of the Italian word for bakery, which is panifico, panificio. So I had taken that and added it to bread and just looked at it. And I'm very funny about letters and the way that aesthetically letters line up with each other. And those are some of my favorite letters, I could tell you, in the way they look and the way they kind of hug each other. And the sound of it too. Breadico is easy to say. It's very recognizable. So we went ahead and went with that.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I mean, obviously, your last name is about as Italian as it gets, So I think it's interesting to talk about wanting to really be an American bakery with an Italian heritage. Talk about your grandparents and where they immigrated from.
Sure. My grandfather came through Ellis Island from Naples, Italy. And that's where our name comes from, Napolitano. It means man from Italy. Whereas my mother, on my mother's side, they came from Mexico and ended up in California. So my family and I originally from Southern California, but we kind of came out here to South Dakota because it was just a much quieter place with more of an open range to grow up. So that's how we ended up out here.
So did you have any interactions with your grandparents, with the orchards, or with just do you think that contributed to you liking to work with your hands?
Oh, absolutely. My grandfather and my father had a landscaping business out in California. So I really grew up doing a lot of that work and working with my hands in general. And I just loved that. And my mother grew up, we grew up with her cooking for me and just always having access to very good food. And as a child and going to restaurants as well. And then in addition, moving out here to South Dakota and being able to watch the farmers do what they do, with wheat and all that there is as well. I think it's just kind of a long stream of, we never really quite know where we're going to end up with some of the things we watch along the way as we're growing up and some of the talents we get. And in terms of baking and running a business and having staff and all of those, there's a lot that we have learned, just that I've learned that I didn't know I was ever going to use, with working with the people that I do and doing the things that we do.
I'm assuming you use local wheat, local ingredients from the farms there. Does that make a difference in the taste, do you think?
It sure does. We're starting to do that more and more. I mean, I have about a ton of it, literally a ton of it here at the bakery that we're going to mill through with our stone mill. And we've been experimenting with different breads and we're incorporating the wheat into the product a little bit at a time. Because what you get when you get local wheat is you get a product that is as raw as it gets. Commercial flour from these big commercial mills, they're very good at what they do. They're the best at what they do. They give you a really great product that you can make beautiful, voluptuous bread out of. Whereas this local wheat is very flavorful. It's very tasty, but the protein levels go up and down. And when you are an artisan bakery of, to the scale that we're essentially getting to, it's much more costly to make a large mistake with, 200 pounds of dough that, oh, well, how do we throw this out now because it's
Yeah.
this live culture, right? So we're really learning to work with it a lot more. And we're trying to get closer to what a loaf used to look like just back in the day.
Yeah. What does that mean? That's fascinating.
Well, the whole concept of bread and fermentation is you mix your water with your wheat and it ferments and it grows. And back when they only had ice boxes and when they were making bread in their hutches and things, they didn't have access to the technology that we do today. So knowing that a bread moves a lot faster fermentationally is kind of an okay thing because it's closer to what they were making back then. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to ferment this local wheat in a way that is very natural along the process. But we're also trying to extend the fermentation process just a little bit with our capabilities so that we get more of the nutritional benefits that come back with it. And in turn, it also gives us a lot of flavor. So it's just a hands-on type process.
You talked about the sourdough. Tell me why I don't make bread, but a sourdough, like the hardest thing to make,
Sure.
I mean, or what is that?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to make bread. You can make bread with commercial yeast, which you find in recipes, and it's one method of making bread. Sourdough and sourdough starters and using all these pre-ferments, it takes a lot of intuition paired with a lot of science. And part of the reason why that's difficult is you have a lot of very A-type personalities who are very scientific minded, right?
Right.
They can follow these rules and they can follow the schematic, but sometimes you'll have to use your intuition in terms of why is this happening and why is this going the way it's going. It's hard for me to say sourdough is the hardest bread to make because we make it every day, and we teach classes and we show people how to do it, and it is very straightforward. It really honestly is, and it can be done very simply. And there's a lot of really very great books out there that can teach you how to do it.
With COVID, bread making became a really big thing. Did you see that? How did you respond to that? And why do you think that happened?
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly happened because I think somewhere in everybody, they think to themselves, I really want to learn how to make bread. And to be honest, nobody has the time. Nobody has the time. But with everybody at home and wanting to work on their skills and practice their skills, I think it's one of those things that everyone kind of just took to and was able to do. And that's really neat for me to be able to see. We have people coming in here now looking for jobs to say, hey, look, I made this loaf of bread. You know, when I was in quarantine, what do you think? Can I have a job?
That's the resume. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a lot of fun. But the way that we responded to that was we just recently started shipping our loaves to people, essentially.
Nationwide,
and
yeah?
Nationwide.
I bought some.
Did you? Well, there we go. See, so a lot of people realized when they started making their bread, this is very hard. When I go back to work, I'm not going to have time to do this. But they liked what they had. You know, if you do make sourdough bread, it's very good. It's hard to go back. On the flip side, a lot of people kind of turned back to us and started buying our bread online, learning more about us, researching us. You know, when coronavirus happened last year, we were essentially just a wholesale bakery at that time. So we didn't have a retail storefront. We didn't have a whole lot of moves in terms of what we could do to respond to this sort of crisis, right?
Right.
We were simply delivering to our grocery stores because bread was one of the things that flew off the shelf during that pandemic, as well as some other strange items as well. But bread was one of them. And so that actually kind of turned out to be okay for us because we were able to sustain that as a production facility. When we turned around and spent the year building what is now our new facility, part of that was intending to design the space so we could give classes, you know, when things open up, but also set up our facility for shipping. And so that's one of the things we've really pursued is shipping bread out to customers all over the United States.
Yeah. Has that been hard for you guys?
You know, I would say no, it hasn't. And the reason I say is because we've just been so blessed to have such great people on our team. And we've had our employees with us for a long time. So they like the work. It's a lot of good, fun, hard, real, honest work. It really is.
Yeah. And then so your classes, what kind of person are you seeing sign up for these classes? Is it all over the board or?
You know, it is all over the board. It is. A lot of older ladies will sign up for the class with their friends, and they come in and they have a glass of wine and they get their hands dirty making bread. And then I have a lot of young men as well coming in and just learning, and they're there with their girlfriend or their fiance or their wife. But I think it's the men that wants to come to the class. And I think that they bring their significant other.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. When you start a class, you stand up in front, you introduce yourself to everybody, and you kind of get a feel for the room, right? You have to get a feel for the room. You throw questions and statements out there just for the sole purpose of trying to figure out who these people are who are sitting in front of you and what
Yeah.
kind of class you're going to have. And a lot of the times, the response that I get are just the men who just kind of sit there with their shoulders hunched at first. It looks like they don't want to be there. By the end of the class, they are just like the ones asking questions. And that's what we try to do for our classes. So there's a wide variety of individuals who are interested.
You said something interesting previously when you were talking about there are so many bread makers now.
Mm-hmm.
We have them here. We can get it online. So when I was asking you to kind of talk about why your bread was different, I thought that was, I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. What we focus on when we make our bread, one is the flavor. Two is the availability, making sure that it's available to people. But kind of our standard is to make sure that we take our dough as far as it'll go before we bake it. And what I mean by that is dough has a life cycle, right? It has a timeline where you mix the dough, it proofs, it rises, it's perfect, it's where you want to bake it. And then the denouement, it begins to deteriorate, right? And just kind of go down, down, down. And at some point, the dough is just going to kind of let out the water and fall apart and die, essentially. We like to take our dough as far as it will go, where it still retains its integrity, but to the point where the gluten, you can actually see it on the dough where it's beginning to deteriorate.
So
And
the bonds kind of
the
break down.
bonds are breaking, and it's like this network. You can see the network in the dough. As it ferments, you start to get these bubbles, and as it breaks down, these bubbles kind of collapse, and you start to see the glutinous networks. That's almost like a skeleton inside of the dough. And if we wait just a little bit too long, and I'm talking half an hour, that structure will deteriorate, and then you'll just have a doughy mess in a pan. We take our dough that far, and the purpose behind that is, one, the flavor is not like you can find, not like I found, but two, it breaks down the gluten so far that I've had a number of gluten intolerant people and customers that are eating our bread all week long. And another thing that I've never quite fully promoted, but I'm starting to get a little more confidence, is that we have a number of celiac customers who are coming in and eating one slice of bread a day, and they have no problems with it. And so that's one thing that we're pursuing, and we're taking all of our products that direction. And I think the reason why a lot of other bakeries aren't doing it, and I hope that more do, you have such a potential to lose so much product. Because we lose bread all the time. We really do, because it goes too far.
One of the things you talked about, which I thought was interesting, it's easy to sort of go, well, what are some of the barriers for starting, something in a smaller market?
Mm-hmm.
But you also talked about some of the benefits and the learning curve. And I'd love to hear you just talk about what is the learning curve and how has that given you an advantage being in a smaller market?
Sure. Well, I had mentioned that we're originally baking bread out of a garage. Very difficult to control things. The consistency of our product was all over the board. And some of my accounts were restaurants. And when you go to a restaurant with a different product every day, it gets them quite upset. If they're a small local business, local restaurant, and they want you to succeed as well because they want you to keep going, they'll be a little more tolerant with you. And I found that with some of my restaurant accounts that they said, look, you've got to get your product a little more consistent. You've got to do a little bit better. You've got to work a little harder if you want to continue, because we want to see you succeed. And I know you want to succeed. And to take that and to step into a retail space and introduce myself to a handful of, to so many customers, it was the same idea of, we have a product that's very difficult to make, but it is a good product. A lot of the customers have been so motivated to see us succeed and to see a lot of small businesses around our town succeed, that they continue to go back and they walk in and they maybe have a bad experience, but they'll come back next week, and they'll continue to support our businesses because they want to see us succeed. If I had started our little business, our little bootstrap business, in a larger city, in a much more competitive market, we wouldn't have been given the light of day, after a number of months, because it's so much competition can be so difficult, especially for a young fledgling business that just needs so much grace sometimes. And I had no experience in in customer service. I had no experience in a lot of these things. We kind of made it up as we went. And it was very good back then because Sioux Falls wanted more food. They wanted more options. They wanted more flavor coming into town. And we were able to do that. And they recognized that with what we were doing with Breadico. And they continue to support us. And I still have customers coming in today that have been coming in and visiting the farmers market 8 years ago. They're still coming back. But I think, and I hope to see this, that same culture that we had 8 years ago, starting our business of customers being forgiving and coming back to you and being generous. I think that we're seeing somewhat of a resurgence of that throughout the United States. And I say that because I think everybody knows small businesses are struggling. There's a war on small business right now. And I hope that the same level of grace that we got as a little fledgling business in Sioux Falls in 2012, I hope that customers can kind of take that and expand on that throughout the United States with what a lot of businesses are going through right now, because a lot of businesses need grace.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, artisan has been on the upswing for a long time, as far as it is clothing and food and all that. But I still think there's more like a revival, but maybe the motivation is a little different. It is coming from this place of support and community and understanding more than just, the elitist appeal maybe in the past, which I think is a really nice progression for small businesses. Do you have any dreams of expanding outside of South Dakota?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I've poured the last 8 years into this business, and currently, in terms of this year, I'm just starting a little family, and so I'm, for the first time in a very long time, starting to really dig into and go back to personally what my personal life looks like and what that's going to be like. And I'm very excited about that. And to be honest, I really want to spend a year just to kind of dig into that and discover what kind of demands do I want my business to take from me. I think that there's definitely direction for us. I think that we have the capacity to expand. I think that there are some offers for some franchises of what we're doing. And I say that in a very wholesome and humble way in terms of I want more people to be able to eat bread, And I don't necessarily mean I want more people to eat my bread. I want more people who are unable to eat bread today to be able to eat bread. And that's what part of my pursuit is, and why I am humbled and excited, about the potentials of a few franchises.
Well, I think another thing that we're seeing, and you just spoke to it, is this idea of, it used to be you would start with your professional goals and then you'd sort of work personal into that vision, right? Especially as an entrepreneur, when you have to just pour everything into it. But now we are seeing definitely this trend of people going, no, I'm actually going to start with my personal life and then I'm going to weave in my professional. And I just think that's super healthy and really exciting. Do you have a favorite bakery around from where you lived in Boston? Is there any place that you love?
When I was in Boston, there's a bakery called Iggy's, and I used to really enjoy their products. They'd come down to Copley Square. And then outside of that, just hands down, the little Italian bakeries in the North End. My favorite one, and it's not bread, but Maria's Pastry in the North End. And I think they just recently closed, but there was such a cute little space, and they had a little cat that would just roam around the store. And it was just a quintessential timeline and way to live down there in the North End. So that's my favorite bakery, I would have to say. And I've thought about trying to do things like that here, make little Italian cookies. I kind of paved the way with that with our name, but it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do. It's been very difficult for someone like myself who has a lot of different interests and wants to make a lot of different things to just focus on a handful of products. For us, sourdough bread, but it's very good and very healthy to do. So yeah, I wish we did have a little Italian cookie bakery here in town.
You talked about how you took a job at a bakery in Minneapolis and how you really didn't know what you were doing, but can you tell that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I moved to Minneapolis to produce a show that I wrote with a friend of mine. And while I was there, I got a job at a bakery. It was just up the street. And I went to the interview and I just staged with them for a day. So I worked with them for a day. And they just asked me all these questions about this and that. And I really just had to fake my way through it and say, yeah, absolutely. I know what I'm doing. I can totally do this. I knew how to shape a loaf of bread because I had known how to shape dough. And when he threw some dough on the table, I just slapped it out for him. And he said, oh, you're excellent. You're the guy for the job. I said, great. So I was put in charge of the bread program at this little pastry shop where they made a variety of breads. And every day I went home, I just had to grab books and read about actually how to make bread because I had never done the process. I had never gone through the whole process. I did at home because it was an interest of mine, but never commercially. So I would show up every day and just learn a little bit more. And there was a sourdough starter at that bakery. My boss had told me, she had said, look, this is your workshop. Okay, just experiment and make good bread. I said, okay. Farmer's market was coming up. And so she looked at me and she said, look, I need you to make bread for the farmer's market that will sell out every week. Like, that's your job. I said, okay, sure.
That's cool.
Cool. So I thought, how do I do that? I really just started to learn how to make bread. I grabbed that sourdough starter and I just started experimenting. I had a few days until the farmer's market, but I started experimenting and I finally figured it out, how to make a leaven and how to use a starter. And one day it just clicked in terms of watching the fermentation and smelling it and understanding the heat and the cool and the temperature and the time. And we started making these breads and they were selling out at the farmer's market every week, just like she had wanted. And I was just like, whew, I was close. I get to keep this job. So I kept the job and I worked there for about 9 months. I finished up what I was doing in Minneapolis with producing the show. And then I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to go now? I want to move. Should I move to San Francisco and learn how to make bread out there? And my father was like, why don't you just come here and build a bakery in the garage? And I said, well, okay, sure. I'm out of money anyway. I'll go do that. So that's when I had moved home and built a bakery and, made some of those same breads in Minneapolis. And I made them here at home and people just loved it.
So you basically were looking for a job, not necessarily like an apprenticeship for learning bread. And it just happened to be at this bread shop.
When I moved to Minneapolis, I had 2 job offers. One was at Finale Make Music, which is a music company that makes music notation software. It's the best music notation software out there. And that was in about 45 minutes away. And then I had a job offer at this bakery, which was about 4 minutes away. And I thought, well, if I go to work in the morning and I come home in the afternoon, I'll have a lot more of my day left to do what I'm doing here in Minneapolis. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that job. I think it's better. So it
proximity,
it paid less, but the proximity of it to be able to go there and just work with my hands and then come home, be able to work with my head a little bit, So it was very good. Yeah,
that's very cool. What's your favorite bread to make?
The sunflower bread.
Really? Why?
Uh-huh. I call it my masterpiece. I really do. We make it here every day. I started making it for the farmer's market 8 years ago. And I thought to myself, I'm going to make this bread the best seller. Like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make people like this bread. And the way to do that is just make it every day, whether it sells or not. You make it every day. That's what I did. And that's what I've been doing for 8 years, is making it every day. And it sells very, very well.
And that needs to be my next order.
Uh-huh. So that's the loaf that I just consider my masterpiece. It's beautiful. Every time I go to another bakery around the US and I taste the bread, I compare it to my sunflower loaf. And that's how I decide, I think we're still doing good work.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So your bar is high, but you're meeting your bar. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So the last question I always ask everybody is, because this is a project that is all about beautiful thinking, how would you define beautiful thinking?
Well, I think that beautiful thinking is being fair to yourself and honest about the work of your hands and the direction of your thoughts. You can pursue so many different things out there. But if you're not honest with yourself, with your art, with your writing, and with your work of your hands, and all of that stems from the mind and all of that stems from your thoughts, right? And if you're not honest with all of it, then just the weight of it, the value of it it has no legs, it has no feet. With art, and this is something that I heard from a forum with Stephen Sondheim, actually, is he says, good art always floats to the top. So that's what I take with me when I see all of these, I'm seeing all these little competitors pop up and all these people asking me questions. What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about this? And I just think good art floats to the top. So my perspective has always been to keep my head down and focus on what I'm making. And with that, we'll float to the top.
I love the idea of working with your hands in the direction of your thoughts. That's lovely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I wish you lots of luck, and I know that you'll do well. And good luck with the birth of your child.
Thank you.
Do you know if you're having a girl or a boy?
It's gonna be a little boy, and I'm hoping he comes today. I'm hoping. I told my wife Megan yesterday. I said, look, or on Sunday, I said, let's have this baby on Tuesday night. let's do this Tuesday night.
Wow. Good luck with that.
Thank
you, David, so much for your time. I wish you all the luck.
Thank you,
I will definitely be placing an order soon.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you too. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you found something that inspires you to think strange, different, new, and beautiful thoughts. This podcast was created and produced by Young & Larimore, an independent agency focused on helping national consumer brands take a stand. To explore more about today's conversation and all of the other thinkers I've spoken to, check out our blog, The Beautiful Thinkers Project, or follow us on Instagram @The Beautiful Thinkers.